Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. It's the pre-show. If you're watching this on the replay, we'll be starting in about 10 minutes. You can fast forward or you can hang out with us in the pre-show as we check a few things, get things ready here in the studio. We're recording down here. We're recording up there. We're streaming. YouTube says we're live. I'll just take it on faith. The chat room will tell me if things don't go well. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Houston's in the house. Tennessee is here. Do we say in the house anymore? Is that played out? The kids don't do that anymore? Okay. You got to keep me, because I have to tell you, it is off the chain. See? So you can't come to me for those kinds of things. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. We got a Security Plus study group coming up. We've got a whole hour of Q&A, and then the second hour, open up the phone lines, and we'll talk and chat and have a grand old time. We've got plenty of questions. This is the last study group of the month. I get an extra week off this month because we have these on Wednesdays, and there are 5 Wednesdays in this month. We had our A+ study group on the first Wednesday. Last week was Network Plus. This week is Security Plus, and then there's nothing else for the rest of the month. What am I going to do with all that time? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll be working. I'll be right here. This picture won't change. If we turned on the cameras, it would look very similar to this, except in the dark, and my screens will be much closer to me. But that's pretty much it. Everything else is all going to be the same. I have plenty of things to work on right now. There's lots of projects going on, and even more than I'm piling on to. So while we know something's going to be happening, let's do a quick check of the cameras. At least they're working. That one's working. Is this one working? It is. Is that one working? It is too. Okay. It's alive. It's alive. It works. So Hypnotoad in the chat room has his or her 501 exam tomorrow. That will be fun. That'll be fun. So now, how are we going to do this? We've got plenty here. We'll get rid of that. Get this here. Do I have ducks in a row? Oh, we didn't change the website. Let's put the bar at the top of the website. Let's save those changes. I already had it ready to go. Click that. Now the bar will be at the top. There it is. Lovely. What else do we need? Oh, I need a couple of things on my screen. I need this thing here, and it needs to point to this. And I need to click on that thing, and we'll go down here. You can't see any of this. And my description of it, probably not the most compelling, is it? So we'll start up this thing right here. It's my course notes. There they are. That's too big. Let's do 2 pages. There we go. Now I was going to do something else I was going to do. There are ways to set a bar that would show and do different things. I am planning to update that. I want to get one that's just on a schedule, so it just pops up. Having it decide automatically to do something is not something I am comfortable with. But I think if I had a schedule to set it to, that would be nice. Everything else is scheduled. The emails go out, the tweets go out. All of that happens in 1 minute and 5 seconds from now. So I always know that that's just automatic. I can set it and forget it. That's the way it should be. Let's see. We've got something else I was going to do. I got that up and running. This is here. Is that it? No, there's something else. Was it a website? Was it a thing? Was it some stuff? What was it? Well, we'll have to find out later, won't we? We'll have to figure that one out later. There's a lot of options for those little bars, those little announcement bars at the top of the site. I've already been doing some research. There's too many options. There's so many options. I have too many options. But I want a very specific set of features that apparently nobody else has. Nobody can provide me. So I have to decide what features do I not want then. And I've been going back and forth over exactly what that would be like. So we've got another 5 minutes before we go live. If you are watching this on the YouTube, you will want to flip over your browser to professormesser.com/live. That's where the chat is. I didn't put that in the description this month. I need to do that. So if you're watching on the YouTube and you're wondering, where's this chat to which he is referring? Well, that would be where that is, at professormesser.com/live. We are not using the YouTube chat, at least not at the moment. I'm considering using the YouTube chat. I just think that's a bad idea. That may not be a good idea at all. That may be an enormous mistake, a ginormous mistake. What was I thinking? We are all wondering after the fact. That's what's going to happen. And I don't have moderators. As you can see, it's a room full of people supporting me. Nothing. How many screens one person get to have on their desk? That's because there are not people here taking care of this for me. Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 LCD screens in front of me just to run this nonsense. I guess technically my phone's off to the side. I don't have to have that one to run this. But it does help. It does come in handy sometimes. I have to go to it and reference that and have it ready to go and that kind of thing. Presentation. We need a presentation of some kind. We need something formal in which to view. There we go. That's more like it. We've got a few more minutes before we get started on this. That's always a challenge. Always a challenge. I've got so many different projects going on right now. I'm just juggling. It's just constant motion. Things are in the air. We're trying to herd cats. It's nonsense. It's crazy. But, you know, it's better to have something to do than not. That would be bad. If I was sitting around after this in the dark alone with nothing to do, there would be an issue there. That would be sad, and you probably wouldn't see me around much longer. But no. In fact, I have more work than I could ever accomplish in my lifetime. So that part's good. Is that really true, though? Is it? I guess it is. I guess it sort of is. I guess that really depends on a lot of different variables, doesn't it? So this little bit of retrospection into life, the universe, and everything was brought to you by Messer Studios. Thanks for joining us. There is a couple of minutes. Does anybody know the passing rate for the Security Plus exam? It is not published. It is not discussed. It is not provided. It is not public. There is no way to know. I think the passing rate is 100%. How about that? That should get you ready to go. Of course it is. For you, it's 100%. That'll be something anyway. We've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Mr. Sinatra, before we get started. Not much more to do here. I think we're in good shape. I feel like I'm forgetting something. I feel like there's a thing I didn't click or a thing I didn't make available on my screen, or it's not in a link, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. So we've got, you do know the results immediately after the exam. So you'll know walking out whether you passed or not. Regardless of whether you passed or not, make sure you get the sheet of paper before you leave the building. If they say we can't give you the sheet of paper, you stand there until they give it to you. If they say their printer's broken, you say find some other way to print it. I need that output. That's probably the most important thing. Because so many places will just not give people the documentation showing how they did. Most importantly, if you didn't pass, that piece of paper tells you what areas you got wrong, so you'll know what to study. So that's ridiculous that they would not have that available. It's so important. This is one of those reasons you have to really check out the places you go to take these exams. So it's one of those. Well, you would think with 50 people in the room you could fix the printer. Anybody ever try to fix a printer? Not that easy. I'm pretty sure printers just don't work. I think it's maybe just a shell made of plastic and inside is just evil. I'm not sure what drives the evil or makes it work. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the evil decides not to work. One has to wonder. It does feel good to be a gangster. I agree with the chat room on that one. It feels good to be a gangster. That's correct. Glad I could bring you a little bit of culture Okay, no culture. Let's get this thing going, though. I've got places to be and things to do, and so do you, most importantly. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2018 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group, brought to you by your good friends here at Messer Studios. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this hour of interactive Q&A if you're here watching us live. If you're watching this on the replay, it's not as interactive as you might have hoped, but you can still follow along with what everyone else is doing. Hang on, and I'll show you in just a few minutes, if you are here live, how you can also participate interactively and answer these questions as they're being asked. I've got plenty of Q&A during this first hour. In the second hour, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and you can ask questions about Security Plus, about IT, about certifications, or anything else of any other kind of topic, unless I wave you off. Maybe that's the way to do it. It's ask me almost anything in the second hour. We've got plenty of things to go through. I'll get to those in just a moment. First, let me tell you thank you for watching my videos. Every minute of every one of my Security Plus training videos is available for you to watch absolutely free on the internets. And you can find those at ProfessorMesser.com. Some of you like to purchase an offline version that comes with the video and the audio, and there are course notes that come with this. If you can get a digital version, there's a physical version. I'll send you books and flash drives. You can find out about that at ProfessorMesser.com/GetSecPlus. Don't forget that there is also Twitter and YouTube links. By visiting those links and subscribing and clicking and doing those things, it does help me on this side, because I'm able to go to YouTube and say, I've got people watching, it's important, help me with these things that you can help me with. And they do. YouTube's been really great about supporting what we're doing with our training classes and with these live streams. So I have a person I can talk to directly at YouTube, and it's thanks to your support for doing that. Thank you so much if you've subscribed to the YouTube channel. There is also an audio version of this that's available afterwards. I usually have it posted later on in the afternoon. You can find that and an audio replay of all of our study groups available at ProfessorMesser.com/podcast. And you can find the A Plus study group, the Network Plus study group, the Security Plus study groups. You can listen to them interactively on that page, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed and use your favorite podcast listening program that will automatically download it whenever a new version is available and out there. The Security Plus certification had to change this slide since last month, because last month we had the 401 and the 501. Now there's only one option for you. If you're planning to take the Security Plus certification here in August of 2018, the only option available for you is the SY0501. It was released in October of 2017. Not even a year old. Hasn't been out for very long, but it's only a single exam. That's another good part about this, by the way, is that single exam is just a single sit down, 90 questions over 90 minutes. Might be fewer questions than that, because the 90 questions is the maximum number you could get not as many as that. Hopefully not as many as 90 questions on your exam. Most people get fewer than that, but they could potentially ask you for 90. The passing score on this is a 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. And since the questions we believe are worth different values, you really can't put a percentage on this. Just do the best you can. You get as many questions correct as you can. And at the end of it, we'll find out if you passed or not, which, by the way, is pretty much how all of these IT certification exams work. So you're never quite sure exactly how you did. I think that's by design when they do that. On the exam, you're going to get a lot of multiple choice questions, but you're also going to get performance-based questions. These are questions that are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. You might be matching things on the screen. You might be putting them in the order from slowest to fastest or highest to lowest. They will tell you exactly what they want from you. Don't worry so much about how they ask the question. If you know the content, it shouldn't matter how the question is posed. You'll be able to answer the information that you'll be faced with in that first section of the exam. So that is one thing that is really important, that you understand exactly what you're going to face whenever you sit down for the exam. And hopefully these performance-based questions are not going to throw you. We'll do a performance-based question in just a moment, our first question of the study group is always performance-based question. So let's talk about how to answer these questions. One of the ways that you can do that is to go to professormesser.com/QA. That will take you directly to one of these applications, one of these links to Socrative. It's a third-party app that we use to be able to ask these questions interactively. Just pop open a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can also go to Socrative directly by downloading the Socrative app. So that's a nice thing to have. You want to get the student app, not the teacher app. Student app is the most important one. It will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, all one word. PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it right or you won't have anything in the room to look at. If you do all of those things properly, a question will be waiting for you. This is a question from last month. So those of you that were here last month may remember this one. If you've typed everything in properly, you've got everything where it's supposed to be, then your question asks, a security team has exploited a known vulnerability on a server and has gained administrator access to the system. Which of these best describes this event? This is a multiple choice question, so I have the option between A, vulnerability scan, B, 0-day, C, port scan, and D is penetration test. So one of those is going to be the best description of what that event happens to be. Now, if you know the answer, what I will see on my side interactively is we'll get to see people voting. And you can see here, 88% of you at this point have said penetration test is by far what people have answered. The next highest is at 7% with 0-day. 4% have said vulnerability scan. Only 1% said a port scan. So it looks like most of you are able to get into Socrative by going to professormesser.com/QA. Seems like you're able to answer questions on here. And in fact, in this particular case, in D, penetration test was the answer for 86% of you. And in fact, penetration testing is the right answer for this one. The real key to this question was it said that you were able to exploit the vulnerability and gain access to the system. The only real way to do that is with a penetration test. This is something that you have initiated and you have intentionally tried to break into your own system or maybe someone else's. But this is one where it's not a simple vulnerability scan. We weren't simply checking the door to see if it was open. We are pushing the door open and walking through. So that becomes pretty useful to have that information there. If you think you are doing well on that one, make sure you check your answers on the questions we pose, and you'll be able to see, in fact, that 89% of you did answer this one correctly with D, penetration test. So you guys you got the idea at this point of how this works. So what we want to do now is get to some new questions. And as I traditionally do at the beginning of a study group, is I like to go through and know immediately, jump right into a performance-based question, because that's what you'll be faced with when you go to the actual exam. You're going to sit down in the room, you'll hit the start button, and the first set of questions are not going to be study group questions. The first set of questions are going to be multiple choice questions. The first set of questions are going to be performance-based questions. And if you're not ready for that, that could throw you, because you may have been waiting for A, B, C, or D, and suddenly you get a completely different drag and drop matching. Who knows what you'll be faced with. So one of the things I like to do on the study group is our first question is going to be a performance-based question. Are you ready? So here it is, our first question of the day, our performance-based question that asks, what secure protocols would be associated with these traffic flows? So this is a fill-in-the-blank question. And since this one is all in text, those of you that are listening on the podcast can follow along as well. What secure protocols would be associated with these traffic flows? The first traffic flow would be A, encrypted terminal communication. We have B, digitally signed email content. C is encrypted statistics gathering from a router. D is protected voice communication. And E is file transfer using SSL. So you really have to know your secure protocols, because you don't have an option here to choose from. This is not a matching question. This one's more of a fill in the blank. I wanted to do matching, and then I felt that was too easy. I needed to really see if you knew what these traffic flows could possibly use for a secure protocol. And that's something that, of course, is going to be asked of you on the exam. So let's go through these one more time. A would be an encrypted terminal communication. B would be a digitally signed email content. C would be encrypted statistics gathering from a router. D would be protected voice communication. And E would be file transfer using SSL. So a number of you are giving me answers already on what these secure protocols are. Some of you are giving me port numbers, which I did not ask for, but thank you anyway. Well, I want the secure protocol that you are using here for this. In fact, port numbers may not even be accurate for what we're doing. We don't know how people are configuring these. There are, of course, well-known port numbers. Maybe that's a bonus. If you tell me the protocol and the port number, well, then you're doing pretty well. Even if you didn't tell me both, think about that as you've put these in, you've given me a list of some of these that are there. See in your mind if you can go through those secure protocols and remember what the port number was associated with those. Although I don't have them listed out on my side either. I'd probably get them wrong if I did that. Trying to do that in real time is just a recipe for disaster on a live stream. So give me those protocol names and I think we'll call it even. Let's see how we did. A number of you answered. A number of you are busy Googling right now. This question is one I wrote fresh. Google has never seen it. You will not be able to easily Google this information. I can tell by the number of answers that are coming in and how quickly they come in as to how many people are trying to get Google working. You don't have Google available during the exam, by the way. You don't have anything available. You walk in with a sheet of paper that they give you and a pen. Usually it's some type of erasable marker and a plastic sheet of paper. And you're the one that has to now go in and maybe figure out this piece of information. Anything that you could have possibly used for reference is not in the room with you, as it should be on a certification exam. So let's see how we did with this group and see if we know what these might be. What secure protocols would be associated with these traffic flows? Let's first look at A, encrypted terminal communication. Encrypted terminal communication should be using SSH, a perfect way to do an encrypted terminal. In fact, it's really the only way we do encrypted terminals. There's other ways that you could have an encrypted terminal. Everybody uses Secure Shell for doing an encrypted terminal. So hopefully that was a gimme right off the start. The rest of them get a little more difficult, a little harder as we go along. B was digitally signed email content. There's lots of ways to digitally sign email content. So I may accept a number of different secure protocols with this, but the one that is probably most often thought of because it is integrated into Microsoft Outlook and that is such a well-used and widely used application is Secure MIME or SMIME. So that's be a perfectly acceptable way to digitally sign email content. Another way, if you wanted to put PGP or GPG, that would be another popular way to digitally sign email content. In fact, later on in the study group, I'll tell you how you can submit a request to earn a continuing education unit credit for this. And I send you back that certification, that digital message, and I digitally sign it. So that's one thing that I use. And I use PGP, or in my case, GPG, to be able to do that. C was an encrypted statistics gathering from a router. So if you want to gather statistics from a device, an infrastructure device on your network, you would probably use SNMP. But only one version of SNMP will perform this function in a secure mode that uses encryption, and that would be SNMP version 3, Simple Network Management Protocol version 3. So that's one you have to think about and know about. If you're someone who's already done a lot of network management, that may have been a gimme for you. Let's do the next one. D is protected voice communication. This is a protocol that is specifically listed in the exam objectives for secure protocols. Normally, an unsecure communication using voice over IP would be the real-time protocol. If you want to have a protected version of this, it will be the secure real-time protocol, or SRTP. So make sure you're aware of that secure protocol as well. And lastly, we have E, a file transfer using SSL, which is different than a file transfer that uses SSH. So this is ones where sometimes it gets a little confusing over which one you should choose. And FTP would be the file transfer protocol. To send that FTP over SSL, it would be what we call FTPS. I think about this in the same way we talk about HTTP. For HTTP is an in the clear, non-encrypted communication. HTTPS uses SSL. What's the same thing for FTP? We've got FTP that's in the clear. FTPS uses SSL. If you put the S at the beginning, just like SSH does, SFTP uses SSH, FTPS uses SSL. So there you go. You've got different options for file transfers that are protected, but only one using SSL. So hopefully that's one that you were able to sit through. So very quickly, A, the encrypted terminal communication was SSH. B, the digitally signed email content was SMIME. C, the encrypted statistics gathering from router is SNMP v3. D, the protected voice communication is SRTP. And E, the file transfer using SSL is FTPS. Hopefully you did pretty well in this performance-based question. You can always go back and look at our replays in the chat room. People are even saying, can we watch this later? Of course, immediately after the study group is over, this is available to watch on YouTube, as all of the archives of these. So you can go back a year and look at all of the performance-based questions that we've done in every single study group. Maybe that will help you if you're planning to test yourself with some of these performance-based questions. Well, let's do some more with performance-based questioning, and let's see if we can figure out what the different options might be with multiple choice questions. Finally, we can get away from some of this performance-based and just choose between A, B, C, D, or E. Maybe that would be a good way to do it. Let's run through this next question. This one's relatively straightforward. Hopefully this multiple choice question will be familiar to you. And the question is, what would this information describe? And for those of you that are looking on the screen, there's a bunch of information here. For those of you listening, let me describe what we have. What would this information describe? It's a long line of text that is CN equals Messer Studios, comma, OU equals manufacturing, comma, O equals corporate, comma, L equals Tallahassee, comma, ST equals Florida, comma, C equals US, comma, DC equals Professor Messer, comma, DC equals com. There's a long bit of text there. So if you think you know what that information describes, you have some options available. Don't mention it in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA, where a number of options will be available for you. These options are A, X500 data. B is MS-CHAP authentication data. C is a firewall rule base. D is a TOTP generator. And E is a SAML authentication flow. One of those best describes, or does describe, not just best, it really does describe what that information happens to be. You think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can add that to the list. I'm going to take a sneak peek. I think a number of you will know what this is, and I think you do. No answering in the chat room. Your thoughts, ideas, comments, suggestions, we can hold those off to the end. If you think you know what these things happen to be or what they look like, this would be your opportunity to answer by going to professormesser.com/QA. Maybe that would also help you whenever you're trying to figure things out. If you think you know what it isn't, sometimes that calculatus limitatus can help you by going through that list and trying to determine, do I know what it isn't? And maybe you're able to get rid of a number of different options. On your exam, make sure you answer every question. Don't leave anything blank, because you can guess and get points out of this. It doesn't hurt to guess. You don't get points taken away if a question is wrong. So make an opportunity to try to make sure everything is listed, answered. You've got a multiple choice selected on every single question before you submit that exam. Even if you just answer A on everything you don't know, you've got probably a 20 to 25% chance depending on the question you're running across. So let's see how we did with this one. The question, of course, is what that information would describe with the CN equals, OU equals, O equals, L equals. What the heck is all of this stuff? Well, we have 50% of you think that all of that stuff is X.500 data. 24% of you believe that to be MS-CHAP authentication data. 17% say that that's a SAML authentication flow. And then we got a tie for fourth at 5% apiece of C, firewall rule base, and D, TOTP generator. So which one would it be? What would the proper answer be? 50%, half of us say it's X500. Is it really? Well, it is. X500 distinguished names. It's a standard format for adding this information very commonly into an LDAP database is where you'll see this, but it can be added to any really type of name services. This is a very common way to do it. And some of these common attributes you will see across the board, a CN being a common name, or an OU, an organizational unit. Those are things you'll often see. If you're doing anything with Microsoft Active Directory and you're trying to get authentication by using LDAP into Active Directory, you will see these types of things listed. So this will also help you narrow down what these happen to be. So this might help you too. It's just a way to document what a particular object happens to be in the database. And you can assign all of these different attributes to the object. This allows somebody also to do some very quick lookups in the database. Show me everybody that's got an OU that equals marketing. Show me everybody that has an L that's equal to Tallahassee. So you're able to find all of these different types of parameters and do some very quick lookups based on these attributes that you have stored into some type of name services. One of the most common being Microsoft's Active Directory services. So this is something you should know. So in fact, on this question, the X500 data is exactly correct. 50% of you did get that one absolutely correct. 23% of you said MS Chat authentication data. And as some of you have worked with Microsoft Chat, you know that Microsoft Chat uses a username, a password. It can use other types of parameters for authentication. And it also uses a good bit of information, a challenge from the server. That's the C part of Chat, is the challenge handshake. So there's a challenge sent from the server. The password is added to that, and that's sent across. So not quite what we were looking for in this case. We've got a 16% of you said a SAML authentication flow. SAML uses a very complex flow of information back and forth, and it doesn't necessarily use the type of information we're seeing here. To have that X500 there, to have all of those. We've got C, a firewall rule base, and TOTP generators doesn't apply for this particular data either. So to have all of that there is probably the most important part of that. Yeah, the X509 is a standard for certificates. The X500 is a standard for the LDAP format. So that's why you have those minor differences. And in fact, some of the parameters in these look very similar to each other, don't they? But the format for a certificate very different in what we were looking at from this piece of information that we have available there. So hopefully that's one when you were working through what all of these different parameters are in LDAP. It's useful to know what those formats are. You will run into LDAP and using LDAP all the time. If you get into networking and into security, you will be authenticating against LDAP databases from all sorts of different devices. You will become very familiar with LDAP. It's going to help you a lot to know that. Let's do another question. I've got another multiple choice question for you, again, from the Security Plus exam. This question asks, which of the following would be an example of a compensating security control? Which of the following would be an example of a compensating security control? I have some examples for you. Here they are. 5 different options available. Is it A, barbed wire fence? Is it B, a login banner? Is it C, a UPS? Is it D, a firewall? Or is it E, an IPS? Which one of those would it be? This is one where there's many different kinds of controls you need to know for your exam. And of course, this is another type that you need to know, the compensating security control. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you'll be able to answer that question as well. This is one you do need to know. In fact, there's lots of different possible answers to this one, but only one that happens to be listed in the one that I have here. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Remember, no hints, no messages, no answers in the chat room, please. And if you're watching on YouTube, of course, that chat room is available at professormesser.com/live. That's where the live stream and the chat room happens to be. Yes, on the Security Plus exam, being familiar with those acronyms can be very helpful on the exam. They ask you questions in acronym form, but don't ever seem to ask you what the acronyms mean. So if you spend a lot of time just memorizing what the acronym names are, that's not going to help you very much. You need to be able to look at CHAP and know what CHAP means. How does that work? What is it? How is it implemented? Where would I see this used? In fact, you may not even have to know what CHAP is as long as you know what it does. That's all too common. In fact, whenever you work through anything dealing with technology, very often we ourselves forget, why do we call it that again? What is radius? Is it remote? I don't remember. I just know we need to set up a radius connection. All too common. So you have to know what those things are and how they work. Make sure you're familiar with all of those abbreviations, but you know what they are, most importantly. So let's step through a compensating security control and what it happens to be. How do we do with this particular question? Well, we've got a number of different options, and we're kind of all over the place. 38% of us have chosen EIPS. 22% have chosen CUPS. We've got a lot of PSs in here. 18% have said B, log and banner. 14% said D, firewall. And 8% said barbed wire fence. There are a lot of different security controls out there you may run into. Most people chose, 38% of you chose IPS. So this, of course, was asking about a compensating security control. But an IPS is probably best categorized as a detective security control, which may or may not prevent access to the network. But it's something like a motion detector, or in this case, an IPS or an IDS, to have those there. A compensating security control is something that doesn't necessarily prevent an attack from occurring. It allows you to restore the network or the systems using some other means. So our question specifically was talking about a compensating security control. If our entire site went down, if everything was wiped out on a system, somebody was able to get access to a server and delete everything, one compensating security control would be to restore from a backup. If all of our power was pulled, we have an attacker outside of the data center that found the switch to turn all of the power off, we have a way to compensate for that, a compensating security control. And that compensating security control would be a UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. So in our particular answer, a UPS-C was the right answer. 24% of you did choose UPS in that particular case. I have an entire video on security controls that go through all of these different security controls, all of the different options, and it lists out barbed wire fence, login banner, and firewall. You can step through all of those. And the section 5.7, the video is called Security Controls. You can always go through and look for all of those on the videos that are available online at professormesser.com. Let's go to the next question. I've got more here. I'm trying to get through as many as possible since we're about the halfway mark already of our study group. We've got another question available, though. And the question is, this is definitely a 501 question. Which of the following would be a common use of a nonce? Which of the following would be a common use of a nonce? So this is definitely a question associated with the 501 exam. Would it be A, encrypt a hash with a private key? Would it be B, hide sensitive information within an image file? Would it be C, create a separate public-private key pair for each session? Would it be C, calculate a shared symmetric key without transmitting the key across the network? Or would it be E, randomize a password hash during login? One of those is going to be the common use of a nonce. Now, all of these, many of these, more than one answer, you could use a nonce with, but that wasn't the question. The question is which of these would be a common use of a nonce? And you do need to understand what a nonce is, how it's used, how it's implemented, how you would take advantage of that. If you think you know the answer, then go to professormesser.com/QA. And of course, you can step through this. Now, this is where things get tricky, as people in the chat room are saying, what's a nonce? What are you talking about? What are you referring to? Already you have a problem. Already this is going to be a guess for you. You've now just got to choose A, B, C, D, or E and go with it. That's all you can do. This is a topic that was not on the 401 exam. As I've mentioned before, a massive amount of content was added brand new to the 501 exam. So make sure that if you're somebody who is trying to figure this out and go through the paces of how do I learn all this content, get those exam objectives. If you've been studying the exam and you've been going through the 401 content, you're going to find the 501 content is a dramatic difference. Over 60% of the exam is brand new. So make sure that you're very familiar with what's on the 501 exam because it's going to be an incredibly important thing for you. Make sure that you go through all of those. It's one where a lot of people don't realize walking in that the exam is completely new now. Practically over half the exam is new. So make sure you are aware of that when you step through this. Let's see how we did with this particular question. We have which of the following would be a common use of a nonce? And as we look at the answers, 40% of us said to randomize a password hash during login. We didn't get a majority on this one, but that's pretty high. The second highest was 26% of you said C, create a separate public-private key pair for each session. We've got 18% of you that said calculate a shared symmetric key without transmitting the key across the network. 11% of you have said encrypt a hash with a private key, and then 6% of you said B, hide sensitive information within an image file. Well, now we have to take a step back, and for those of you trying to figure out what in the world are you talking about with the nonce piece, the nonce is, for the time being, it's a piece of information you use one time, and then you don't use it again. It's very commonly used in cryptography. You use it to add some randomization, or at least some pseudo-randomization, something that people would not be expecting to pieces of information. Some people use nonces for counters. I have an example of how we do that with some of the block cryptography. I have pictures and diagrams of how that's done with the new videos. One very common way to use a nonce would be during the login process. The server gives you a nonce, you put in your password, you hash it, you add the nonce to the password hashing piece, you send all of that across to the host, and every time you log in, you'll be sending different information to the host. So it's a very good way if somebody's listening in, they want to perform a replay attack later, they can try to use that password hash you sent to the server, but it's not going to work because the nonce has been added to it and they're not going to have an updated nonce. They're going to be repeating an old nonce, which is a no-no. You don't repeat. It's only used one time. That's the beauty of the nonce. So that's why in all of these different options available, the one that was the most common use of a nonce and one you'll see all the time commonly used is indeed E, randomize a password hash during login. 40% of you did choose that. We got almost 50% on that one. Creating a separate public-private key pair for each session is not associated with a nonce, although having that is certainly a one-time deal to have that information, but it's not something you commonly use a nonce for. You're really creating a separate public-private key pair for that. 18% of you said calculate a shared symmetric key without transmitting the key across the network. That would be Diffie-Hellman key exchange, wouldn't it? That really doesn't have anything to do with the nonce. You got 10% of you that said encrypt a hash with a private key. You're using your private key for that. You're not using a nonce for that. And then 6% of you said hide sensitive information within an image file. Although using a nonce to help with the cryptography might help you, we're really referring to a completely different process in that particular case that does not involve nonces for that. Whenever you start looking into the details of these questions and trying to find the most common answer, it should jump out at you. And in fact, this one does, because randomizing a password hash during login is just a very common way to use nonces. It's used all the time to have those pieces available. So these are new topics. This one came directly from section 6.1, randomizing cryptography. If you wanted to go into more detail with the nonces and how they work, that would be a great place to go to check those out. There is all kinds of new information in the Security Plus exam. If you're someone who's gone through all of my videos, you know there is a huge amount of detail in these videos. You should absolutely go through these videos, of course, and you should learn everything that's there because they are addressing every topic from the CompTIA exam objectives. So everything from network design and cloud computing and encryption and security controls and risk management and secure protocols and security tools. It goes on and on and on. Plenty of information there. I have taken everything from all of these videos, all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the important details, and I put them into one document. These are my Security Plus course notes. These course notes can provide you with a wealth of information. This goes well into 93, 94 pages worth of content in here. I'm just going to flip through a few pages of this. It's organized and sorted in the same format, following the CompTIA exam objectives, so information is very easy to find. The documents where I describe how different things happen, for instance, DNS amplification, is listed in these course notes. A huge amount of content is in here. And of course, this is a great way to help support the site as well. And your support for here has been overwhelming. Thank you so much for being part of what we're doing here and making this content available. If you'd like to learn more about these course notes, you can go to professormesser.com/securitycn or just follow the links from the main page or from the Security Plus page. You'll be able to find those. These are written specifically for the SY0501. I write all of them brand new every time, so you know you're getting an accurate set of course notes that is specifically written for the most updated SY501 exam objectives. Find out more about that, professormesser.com/securitycn, and you'll be able to learn more about what you could do to get these course notes. There's, by the way, not only a digital version available, but if you buy, there's a physical version available. So I'll mail you the book. I'll ship it right to you. And when you buy the physical version, it comes with the digital version for free. So everything that you can have in the physical version, you can download immediately and then just wait by your mailbox for that to arrive from the Messer Studios World Headquarters. We ship all of these things out. They're actually built on demand. So the instant you order it, I create one that's just for you, and that's shipped directly to you. I'm not kidding there. That really does happen that way. Find out more, professormesser.com/securitycn, and thank you for your ongoing support with this. It does make a difference. We really do appreciate it. I've got more questions for you. Let's do another one. This one, oh, here's a long question. So I need to get this one up on my screen so I can give you the entire thing. So sit back. Here's our question. A security administrator has recently installed a new application for the accounting department. The following week, a zero-day vulnerability was identified with the application. The application developer has issued a statement that a patch should be available in 3 months. What vulnerability type is this? So this is one where we do have to step through the different vulnerability types. Your possible options are A, embedded system, B, end of life, C, improper input handling, D, lack of vendor support, or E, misconfiguration. So this is one where you do have to step through the story, as they're saying in the chat room. These are very common on the Security Plus exams, even hard to see with my big head in the way. So let's move my head out of the way so you can see this. A system administrator has recently installed a new application for the accounting department. The following week, a zero-day vulnerability was identified with the application. The application developer has issued a statement that a patch should be available in 3 months. What vulnerability type is that? Hopefully you know what type that is. If you think you know, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can choose one of those possible answers. This is a sort of a long question. It does take you down a little road of a story, but these are things that you will commonly run into in daily life, dealing with vendors and third parties and applications and accounting departments. Maybe not so much accounting departments. I did have to deal with accounting departments back in an earlier day. When you work for a financial company like I did early on, there was a lot of work being done in the accounting department. So that was a pretty important part of the company. It's interesting, wherever you go, there's different parts of the company that become so important for getting these things available. So maybe that's one wherever you're trying to work through, wow, what can I do with these different options? What different things might be available? Make sure you go through all of those as well and try to figure out the details. Maybe that'd be one you could step through whenever you got these here. Let's see how we did with this one. The question, of course, you got this accounting department application, a zero-day vulnerability was identified. The application developer says a patch is available in 3 months. What vulnerability type is it? Well, 62% of you say it's lack of vendor support, but 16% of you, double digits, say that it's a embedded system. We've also got answers in here that ask for 10%, say improper input handling. We've got 9%, now down to single digits, say misconfiguration. Only 5% said end of life. So this is a real good question as to what will be happening with these. So whenever we start looking at vulnerabilities and what we can run into, whenever there's a vendor that just is not giving you the type of support you would need, that's quite an issue. Things like a 0-day vulnerability is a significant problem. That is something where suddenly this system is vulnerable. There is no particular patch available for it, and yet it being a 0-day, there are ostensibly some attacks that are coming out about this. So in this case, for a vendor to say, yeah, we'll get a update for you, about 3 months. 3 months is a lifetime in the world of IT security. That is definitely lack of vendor support. That is someone who does not have a sense of urgency over how quickly an accounting application, which probably contains some very sensitive information, are not there to help fix the problem. So you're relying on these vendors. No one else can fix this issue. You can't fix the issue. You can't hire a third party to fix the issue. You can't start over with a new application. That would probably cost way too much money and way too much time. You have to fix the problem now. What do? There may be a way that you can, depending on how the 0-day manifests itself, what the different attack vectors are, there may be a way to mitigate these attack vectors for this particular application. You may be able to put a firewall in the front and prevent certain kinds of traffic from coming inbound to the server. Still, your server is going to be vulnerable. You've just solved the symptom and not the problem when you run into that. So your question there, spot on. 62% of you say lack of vendor support. That is the right answer for this one. Lack of vendor support is the right one. Why isn't it an embedded system? 16% of us said embedded system. Embedded systems are commonly used where you don't have access to the operating system. It's not running on a server. It's running on maybe an appliance that is built specifically for it, and you don't really have access to the insides of the operating system. So that would not be the case here. Something like an accounting application is not really embedded into a piece of hardware. So that would not be the right answer for this one. You've got 9% of you said improper input handling. Well, we don't know that that was actually the case for the 0-day vulnerability. So we can't really say that's the type of issue associated with this. And that's not necessarily a vulnerability type either, but it is a type of vulnerability that you could run into, a type of vulnerability attack type instead of a vulnerability type. Improper input handling could be part of an issue, but nothing in the question had anything to do with improper input handling. Nobody asked anything about that. We've got 8% that say misconfiguration. We don't know that the problem here is associated with a misconfiguration either. And 5% said end of life. The vendor hasn't said that the application is over, that they're not going to support it anymore, that it's end of life. They've just said it's going to be a long time before we're able to get you a patch, which is a pretty bad problem. And it certainly speaks to a lack of vendor support. That's a challenge whenever you run into those issues. This is something you will run into very often in security, by the way, is managing these vulnerabilities. You have many different applications, many different operating systems, many different versions of operating systems and vulnerabilities. All of them have the potential for vulnerabilities. Somewhere inside of every piece of application and operating system you're running right now has a vulnerability in it. And we know that it does because next month, Microsoft is going to have a patch for us for the vulnerability that today we don't know about. It's a constant race. It's a constant battle to stay in front of the attackers. So this is why we have to, from a security perspective, understand what we're facing, understand the patching process, understand change management, understand how we manage for the next one, how that process can be sped up, how we can make our systems more secure, what we can use for mitigation. And that's just a portion of what we have to know from a security perspective. Let's do another question. So those of you that did answer, by the way, D, lack of vendor support, 63% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another question. This one is a fill in the blank. So I do not have multiple choice on this one. So we can think of this one as sort of a mini performance-based question when we get to this next slide. Do not answer this question in the chat room, though. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to answer this question. And the question is, what created this output? Now, for those of you that are listening on the podcast, it's difficult to describe what this output is because it's a big page of IP addresses and numbers. So let me at least give you the first couple lines. If you're listening in, line number 1, which is actually has number 1 next to it, has 10.1.10.1, and then it has 2.663 milliseconds, 1.862 milliseconds, and 1.899 milliseconds. The line number 2 has 96.120.58.137. We've also on line number 2 have 8.049 milliseconds, 9.556 milliseconds, and 9.076 milliseconds. And it just keeps going down the line. There's 10 different lines, plenty of questions on here of different IP addresses available. There are lots of numbers associated with all of these. Something created this output, but what was it? That's the real question we're trying to figure out for these, is what would it be? So for some of you, this may be easy. For some of you, you may have never seen this before. So it's important that we focus our efforts for this question on looking at the data, stepping through all of these, and trying to determine what this happens to be. I think most of you probably would know this one, but some of you may not have run into this before. I will tell you as a hint that in the exam, you will be expected to know how to use all of the different command line tools available to you, all of the different graphical tools available to you. There's a big list of tools that you have to know. And this output was made with one of them. In fact, this output could have been made with more than one of them. But you have to be able to know what created this output, how to use these things, how to really step through and understand how to use these tools. This is really an easier question than a question you might get on the exam that would expect you to use this tool to answer a much more difficult question. So we're kind of easing you into what created this output and how it was here. So for those of you that have run through this before, you're comfortable with this, you're familiar with this, this was an easy one. But for some of you that are really just learning this content, you may not have seen this before. So you think you may be able to do that. Those of you that have run this before may recognize traceroute. That is really what created this content, being able to map out how a packet is going across the network from the first router to the second router to the third router to the fourth router to the fifth router, and so on. It's a way that you can determine exactly what hops a particular packet takes along the way when you go from one side to the other. This is something that's available in almost any operating system, in many routers, in many firewalls, lots of different options. For Windows, it's traceroute, T-R-A-C-E-R-T. For POSIX, which would be Linux and Unix-based questions, it would be traceroute, just spelled out for those things. So hopefully that's one you are familiar with. Let's fix a few things on my side so that I can keep going with this study group. This is one that you should not only be familiar with what this output is, you should be able to read this output. So very quickly, I'm going to go back here so that you can see what this output looks like. Maybe I can get a better view of this over here. This is what this output looks like. So we're able to see in this particular case, I was actually doing a trace route from my desk, my network, which is the 10.1.10 network, and I was going to whatever the local Google DNS is for me. So 8.8.8.8 is my final destination down here. And that's, for those of you familiar, that's Google's DNS server. Now that 8.8.8.8 is not just one server, that's a completely distributed IP address that can be located anywhere in the world. What is the way I get there? What are the number of hops available for me? And so you can see it's 10 hops away. In these 10 hops, there's some interesting things that happened along the way. The way traceroute works by default is it shows you the IP address or name of the first hop. I've told traceroute in this case, don't give me the DNS name, just give me the IP address associated with it. And for this case, it went to 10.1.10.1, which is my local router on my local subnet, and it performs the trace 3 times. And it gives you what the turnaround time, what the response time is for each one of those 3 times. Now, you could tell traceroute, don't do this 3 times, just do it once. I just want to get the entire list and I'm good. But by doing it 3 times, we can at least get a feel for what type of response times we're getting through the network. Now we've got hop number 2, which is, if you were to do a reverse lookup on these, that's a Comcast router. So because I'm on a Comcast network, and you can see my response times. And it keeps going. Notice when we get to hop 8, I get 3 asterisks. There's no IP address, and I get 3 asterisks. No response times are there. That particular router has decided not to respond to me with an ICMP message. Probably filtering ICMP, because I should be getting back from this router that my time to live has exceeded. And I didn't get anything back. So I can't put an IP address associated with it, and I can't understand what response times there may be because I'm not getting any response. So I just increase my time to live by 1. I send the next one. Well, the next router picked it up. In fact, the next hop was hop 9. I sent it 3 times. And for hop 9, I got 3 different IP addresses. For hop 10, I got 3 different IP addresses, or 2 different IP addresses. And then finally, I got to 8.8.8.8. So sometimes you will see multiple paths appear in the trace route. And we certainly got some of those probably once we got closer to the Google side of things. So there's a little redundancy built into the Google network. Who would have thunk? Of course there is. And that is traceroute. That is the output that provided that information for me. Now, if you're watching this study group for a continuing education unit, that's how you're planning to use this hour of your time, here's how you can send me information so that I can send you back a certified digitally signed email that says you must have watched this. Here's the process you must follow. If you do not follow this process, I cannot send you a CEU, because following the process is actually part of the CEU process. What you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. You must use this link. I have an automated system that I use as I flip through these, and it is one where I manually send these to each and every one of you. So I'm reading what's in here, but you have to use this so that my system works properly. Go to the top or the bottom of the website, click on Contact Us, which is really contact me. It will ask you for a name and email address. Make sure those are correct, because I use your name and I use the email address, obviously, to send it back to you. There is also in the top of there is a place to put a comment. Somewhere in there, put a comment that this is the August 2018 Security Plus Study Group. You also want to put into that list, you can put anything you'd like. And put a message if you'd like. I'm the one who's reading them. You can put me a note in there. But somewhere in there, put the word traceroute. And that way I will know up to this point that you have been following along. You know exactly what the CEU secret code word of the month happened to be. You followed this process exactly by going to the Contact Us link, and I usually turn these around about a week or so. I'm up to date right now up to yesterday. So if you sent me a request yesterday, you haven't gotten a response yet, but I'm up to date for yesterday, which, by the way, is a rarity. So I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. I have a system now that I've got a macro set up on my screen where a lot of this process is automated now. So I can look at it, verify you did it right, verify the numbers. I click a button. I click only 2 buttons now, and it gets back to you very quickly. So I like that that's available. Hopefully you can use that as well. So that's one way you can earn a CEU. You don't have to get me to send you a digital email, but it's kind of nice that you have a way to validate that after the fact, because you can run it through and validate that my digital signature does validate for the information that's in the email that I'm sending to you. So something that can help you out as well. Let's go to the next question. I've got one. We've got time for another one, don't we? I've got another question on here. Let me fast forward through all of the screens that I have here. I have a lot of detail on this in this exam where I put all these slides in, but we just don't have time to go through all of the detailed explanation of these. So I've got another question for you that deals specifically with SSL. So here's our question, the next one that's here. Need to make sure that I have it on my screen as well. The question is, an organization has implemented SSL/TLS as a security requirement for all externally facing web pages. However, system administrators are complaining of additional CPU utilization on the web servers. Which of these would be a way to minimize this overhead? Would it be A, implement SSL offloading? Would it be B, replace the web server engine? Would it be C, enable TCP 443 on the firewall? Would it be D, disable all proxies? Or would it be E, install an aggregation switch? You could do all of these. In fact, you can implement every single one of these. But this was a very specific question that was asking you about an organization that has implemented SSL TLS as a security requirement for all externally facing web pages, which is exactly like my website. However, system administrators are complaining of additional CPU utilization on the web servers. Which of these would be a way to minimize the overhead? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer this question as well. In the chat room, people are asking, will this exam be posted to look at? I will have this replay available on YouTube immediately afterwards. So the YouTube is immediately there. Once we finish up the study group, it takes a minute or two for it to do its processing, and then it's available for everyone. And then I create a separate page on the website and add it to playlists. I usually do that later in the day so that you have access to all of those. So your organization, maybe you've worked with this as well. Maybe you've run into this scenario. In fact, we were talking about this in one of the chat rooms because the latest version of TLS has been finalized, and we're wondering, this might cause additional CPU utilization on the servers. So what can we do to minimize this overhead? Let's see how we answer this particular question. Let's see how we did with this one of implement SSL offloading, replacing the web server engine, enabling TCP 443 in the firewall, disabling all proxies, or installing an aggregation switch. We have 71% of us have said implement SSL offloading, certainly a majority. A big majority. For that 16%, those say install an aggregation switch. That's what you should do to minimize overhead. 6% of you said enable TCP 443 on the firewall. 4% said to disable all proxies, and 3% said to replace the web server engine. Well, some of these could help, maybe a little. But if I was to choose one, if I had to pick one of these things that would really help me understand how to solve an overhead problem with SSL, I think the 72% of you were spot on with this one with SSL offloading. You might also hear this referred to as SSL acceleration. And that's because normally the web server and the client are communicating to each other directly via HTTPS. So what we want to do is maybe put something in the middle that will offload the SSL communication. Well, now you've seen the next question. That will offload the SSL communication so that I'm speaking HTTPS securely to the SSL accelerator. The SSL accelerator is usually in the same data center as the web servers because it is very often communicating in the clear via HTTP back to the web servers. So that's another way that you can implement this acceleration. In the case of my servers, I don't do any SSL offloading, although there is a proxy in front of all of my web servers to give you the fastest performance regardless of where you might be in the world. But my entire communication between you and the proxy and between the proxy and my web server is all over HTTPS. It was TLS 3.1 that was recently ratified. So that is the latest version that you should see rolling out. Or was it 1.3? 1.3? Am I losing my mind? Yes. That was easy. That was an easy question. So in this particular case, one of the things you will implement, you'll see this implemented in very, very large environments, which is some type of SSL acceleration, especially when you've got some older servers. Those servers are not really designed for these newer and larger encryption keys. You have hundreds of these servers and thousands of people hitting these servers, and you need to optimize your network the best possible way, because from the performance perspective, it's that end user experience that you want to be sure is as fast as possible. So if you can offload and put the SSL decryption and encryption proxy process on some type of purpose-built hardware like an SSL accelerator, you're going to be doing very, very well. You're going to increase the performance, increase the speed, decrease the response times that people are getting, so things happen very, very quickly inside of their browser. That's what you're shooting for whenever you get to these particular issues. Hopefully, that's one. Whenever you look at the different options here, it was the SSL accelerator. If we go through some of the other options that were here, we've got installing an aggregation switch, which would simply add more bandwidth. It would allow more traffic to get to your servers, but it would not help offloading of the CPU. In fact, it may increase the amount of CPU utilization because you have a lot more traffic going to your web servers. That's not necessarily what you're trying to do either. Enabling TCP 443 in the firewall, hopefully that's already enabled, because it had to be enabled if for this entire time people have been hitting your server via HTTPS. In fact, you wouldn't be complaining of CPU cycles if the firewall was blocking the traffic. Your CPU would be great. But in this case, we know we've got a CPU issue. So it's not going to be enabling 443 in the firewall. 3% of you said replacing the web server engine, which might help a little, but you've still got the same cryptographic function that has to occur whenever somebody is performing SSL communication. So it's 1.3. It's TLS 1.3. Thank you. See, I wasn't losing too much of my mind. I was in the ballpark. And D, disabling all proxies. Gosh, proxies often help with the encryption decryption process. So disabling them, probably not a great idea, assuming you had any in place to begin with. So there's where you run into things, working through all of those different pieces. So hopefully, whenever you're working through all of those, that's one, might help you as well. Aggregation is adding additional lines. So instead of having a single gigabit link to a server, we're going to have an aggregated link of 2 or 4 or 8 gigabit links into a server. Might help you as well with getting all of those done. All of this information that comes from all of these questions that we're doing come from the CompTIA exam objectives. As I mentioned earlier in the study group, this is one of the best resources you can use when you're studying for your exam and when you're trying to answer that question, am I ready to take the exam? It is a checklist of everything you need to know for the exam. And I mean everything. CompTIA details in amazing accuracy exactly what you need to know. So if you're trying to find a big checklist, if you need to understand what do I need to know about a particular topic, they tell you in these exam objectives. One way to get your hands on these is to go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will bring you to that page. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives, and I will redirect you over to the CompTIA website. It is one of the best things you should have. You should have it before you start studying, and you should use it as you're finishing your studying and you're making those plans to go in to take your exam, and it's free. Why wouldn't you download this? Why wouldn't you use it? It's a great checklist. That's where I get all of this information from my videos, and that's where I pull all of this information from for the questions that we went through today. Make sure you use that as well. It's the best tip I can give you, and it's a tip I will constantly tell you about. We do one of these study groups every month. The next study group is going to be in September the 19th. If you're watching this video and we're well past September 19th, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, or just click the calendar link that's at the top of the page in the menu, and it will tell you when the next live event happens to be. Obviously, prior to that September 19th event, we have an A+ study group and a Network Plus study group. So there's a lot going on before we even get to the next Security Plus study group on September the 19th. We've gone through an hour of Q&A. Stick around for the next hour. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll take questions from the chat room. You can call me directly. Whatever you'd like to know, whatever you'd like to ask, you can ask. I don't know that I'll answer, but you're welcome to ask anyway. Don't forget about the course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. And of course, if you want to find me on any social media thing, you go to professormesser.com/Twitter, /YouTube, /Facebook, /Instagram, / whatever it happens to be. If I'm there, it will take you there. If I'm not there, then you'll just get a page that says there's nothing there. Why did you think that he would be on that social media site with the kids? I try to stick to the big 3 or 4 or 5. And that's plenty of time. I can get sucked in pretty easily, and then I never come out of that hole of social media. It's important that I keep making content for you and do another study group. So don't forget about those pieces either. We've got a lot more to do today. We're going to open up the phone lines. We're going to talk about all kinds of different topics, I'm sure. You guys are very good with calling in. But this ends our formal Q&A for the month. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Yes, I have not updated my Instagram, as people are so quick to remind me. I do need to take more pictures. There's things I could be taking pictures of too. My problem is I'm not in Instagram mode. I have to somehow remember when it happens to take the picture. I'm not like the kids where everything is through the lens of a phone in my life. Suddenly I'll think, I probably should have taken a picture of that. When my power supply, when my card messed up, my video card messed up, my power supply wouldn't start, that would have been a great Instagram. Didn't do it. I got to work harder on that. Folks are so good. So let's quickly go through getting online, getting these phone lines up and running. You're also welcome to ask questions in the chat room at professormesser.com/live. So let's quickly get the phone lines up and running, assuming we're going to use them. You don't have to call in. The chat room, we could sometimes sit here and take questions from the chat room for an hour. And there's already questions coming in. So I know that's the case as well. Let me log into the host side so I can host a show and call into it myself. And I've got to do that by myself because I'm the only one here to do this. So let's do that. And let's call in and let's click the button and it makes a noise. There it goes.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome for me calling. And then I type a thing into here. And then I push # and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, all right. We can do that. And then I type this, and then I type that, and then I type this other thing, and it says, well, it says welcome. See, it all works perfectly. Does it though? Does it really work perfectly? We're about to find out as I start this show up and have my information in there. If you would like to call in, you're more than welcome to. You can call in the continental United States, 855-785-7545. It's a toll-free number. I pay for the call. Feel free to call in. You can get into the queue, and we'll take your call in just a bit. If you'd like to call in from outside of the continental United States, you can call using Skype absolutely free. No Skype minutes required by putting a +1 at the beginning. That's +1 855-785-RJ45. That's a good way to dial in if you would like to call in and ask a question. Some of you in the chat room have been asking questions as well. Yeah, I don't use Instagram filters. No filtering on Instagram. You're going to see what I see. And that's how it's going to be because I'm an old guy. I don't do this filter stuff. Watch the next one I do. It's going to have a filter on it. See what you've done with all of those pieces and those detailed, what's my caffeine of choice? Well, funny you would mention today, if I can get untangled from my own microphone. Today I've got some Tim's. Today is a hot beverage of Tim's that hopefully will get me through the second hour. That's pretty important. One quick question from the chat room, then we're going to go to the phone lines. Thanks for calling and holding on there. We're almost full on our phone lines. What is the best source to study for the Security Plus certification when you've not worked in the industry, the security or networking field? That certainly makes it more difficult, but it's not impossible. A lot of the Security Plus exam is talking about process and procedure and sometimes a little bit of memorization. Some of the exam sure helps if you have some practical experience. So there's 4 things I usually will recommend. Get a good book, watch some good videos, do plenty of Q&A, and get as much hands-on as possible, especially if you've never worked in security or networking. So that's the 4 places I would really focus my efforts. All 4 of those. If you spend time doing all 4 of those, the book, the videos, the Q&A, and the hands-on, you're going to do just fine. Absolutely. Any info on the new pen test exam? I have no idea. There is a new pen test exam. That's the info that I have. I have no plans to create any content for a pen test exam, though. Not I, but we can go to the phone lines and talk to the person at 765 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Mickey Sane, and I just, it was less a question and more to let you know. We've been working together, and I know you weren't involved, but we've been working together for the last 10 months, and I actually finished up my A+, Security Plus, and Network Plus within the last 10 months.
Outstanding. Boy, you really shotgunned them in 10 months time frame. How'd you do that?
Literally just sat with your courses. I mean, I had the test out. I had some of the other study materials, but I just worked with your coursework and kept exploring at it.
That's good for you. That's a good triple play to have as well. It's a good jumping off point to what you're doing. Congratulations. So the good question would be, now that you've been doing this for 10 months, now what are you going to do?
I'm actually stepping back. I had a history bachelor's, but I'm going for a master's in cybersecurity, so I needed to get the basics out of the way. So I'm headed towards my master's program.
Good for you. I think there's something to be said about that. Cybersecurity, of course, as I mentioned on an earlier study group, is one of those areas where there's just not enough people. We're not even close to filling all the seats we need for that. Part of the problem with that, it's hard to get in at the beginning. You kind of have to start at a networking role. I often tell people, get as much networking knowledge as you can, and then you're finally able to layer on and get security roles on top of that. And whenever you start looking at what you need to do, you're right. It's a very broad scope of things because you have to know operating systems, you have to know networking, and then you have to apply security, all of those pieces. It sounds like a good plan to me. What is your time frame for doing that?
I will start my master's program in December. I'm going to finish up for my penetration testing certification because it's obvious this specialty I like. And
nice.
Then, I should be done in 18 months. But like you said, and like I did, I started with how to put together the computer, just kept pushing step by step by step and living with the OSI model.
Are you looking at going to something like a traditional 4-year university for this type of thing, or have you decided on going to a different route that is not what people would think of as a traditional college or university?
I have a lot of experience from a kid. I'm the kid in the corner that used to type on the computer all day, so I can get away with it. I have some of the non-traditional experience. I just need the paperwork to back that up.
There you
go.
And
I'm attending University of Maryland.
Nice. Good choice, too. So that sounds like a plan. Well, congratulations. Keep going with what you're going. You've got the right idea. You've got the right path. You know what you want to do, which is probably the hardest part, quite honestly. And at this point, you just jump into the river, and it's the whole river will take you wherever you're going to need to go. It's all up to you and how big your boat happens to be at this point.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you so much. You put so much effort. I literally set an iPod in the car with your videos playing all day, so it's keeping at it. I know a lot of guys are still pushing and trying to get this stuff.
Well, I'm sorry you had to go through all of that with me talking that whole time. I did the easy part, though. You're the one who had to do the hard part, so congratulations, and best of luck with the cybersecurity.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care. It's really a great stepping stone. I come from that security background. Prior to doing this full-time, I was working for a next-generation firewall company full-time as a senior systems engineer, where I was implementing next-generation firewalls, configuring, setting up, connecting. It's a remarkable field. I loved it. So it's one of those that there's so much potential at as well. So something that everyone could take advantage to be able to do that. There are colleges for cybersecurity. A lot of the traditional schools are finally catching on. It's taken a while, hasn't it? Let's go back to the phones. The 256 area code. Hi, caller. Are you there? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. This is Dylan from Huntsville, Alabama.
Welcome, Dylan. What can we do for you?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to basically thank you. I have been studying for a while for my CompTIA 901 test, the A+ test, and it's the first time I've ever gotten serious at all with education. And so I found your stuff online and through the college that I'm going to.
Okay.
And pretty much I just used you and and there was a couple of instructors that helped me out through the way, and I got it on Monday, and so now I'm going for the 902, and I'm going to try to take that next month.
Nice. That's a good move to take the next one, just jump right into it. I know a lot of people that put a gap between, but you can leverage a lot of the things you learned in the 901 into the 902, even though it's not a direct overlap. There's not really much overlap between the two exams. Somehow they somehow fit together. Maybe it's just a familiarity with the process and an understanding of how the exams are given that helps a lot, but I find a lot of people do really well in that second exam. Is there a particular thing you're working towards, a particular job or a particular thing that you're hoping to do after you get your 902?
Definitely, yeah. I want to go ahead and get the, pretty much I want to get my Network Plus after that, and then Security Plus. And then I'm going to start at WGU next year.
Nice.
And I'm going to do their cloud and systems administration. And I'm really, really into Linux right now. So it's just a lot of fun.
That's a perfect match. Become as familiar as you can with that Linux side, especially if you're looking into something dealing with the cloud. A huge chunk of cloud-based technologies are based on that Linux operating system. The more comfortable you are with it, the better off you will be when it comes to those types of things. And I've watched people go through WGU, take the cloud services, and then end up working for the company where I go to Rackspace. Whenever you go to professormesser.com, you're on rackspace.com. So I get to call into support and talk to the people who've gone through that process. So I know that's a good path to go. So it sounds like you're heading exactly the right direction, Dylan.
Definitely, yes, sir. And I did want to say one thing, and of course, without saying anything about the test, there was a couple of questions that were not on the objectives that I got on the test. And
you will get
of course, I'm not going to say anything. Yeah, and that was it was very strange because but thankfully I had there was two. The things that was on there was stuff that I had studied before anyway.
Nice.
So it was just good luck apparently.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're seeing things that other people are seeing as well. And I'll tell people if you are, although it may be a little bit too much information for the likes of CompTIA's candidate agreement, the Reddit subreddit for CompTIA r/CompTIA is a fantastic resource for people. So if you're trying to see what are other people seeing on the exam, they do try to stay under the radar with and stay very, very close to not violating the candidate agreement. But that's a great place to go, especially if you've never taken one of these exams before, you don't know what to expect, or you're wanting to hear what other people's experiences are. That's a good resource as well. I just thought I would throw that one in.
Definitely, yes, sir. I appreciate that. And thank you very much for everything you do for all of us here.
My pleasure, sir. Congratulations on the 901. Best of luck with the 902.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Take care. That's always nice to hear, is that you've got now a path. You know what you want to do. It's kind of the hardest part. People ask me very often, what do I do next? I don't know. What do you want to do next? Where do you want to go? The first step is figuring out where you want to be. And that admittedly is the hardest part. How do you get there? You need to set up that particular path. And sometimes that's the hardest part there. To the 937 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? You hear that big beep that comes in. You may not be ready for it. So I might be on mute right now. 937 area code. Are you there, caller? We'll give you another shot. I don't hear anything. So there may be a mute involved here for those pieces. Perhaps not. I'm going to put you back in the queue, though, just because I hate it for you to run into those scenarios and have them available. Let's go back to the calls, though. We've got a 443 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Is it just me? Oh, you know what? I probably wasn't potted up. Are you there, caller 443?
Yes, hi. Good evening, Mr. Professor Messer. My name is Syed.
Hello, Syed. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, sir. First of all, I want to thank you for the brilliant work you do for us by giving us all the information regarding the CompTIA exams And actually, I have a question from you. I was taking a Security Plus exam, and unfortunately, I have failed it for the third time. So it's been between like 2 years gap.
Gotcha.
This is the third time I have failed it. So I actually need your advice or recommendation that should I still stick to doing this certification, or should I pursue some other certification regarding cybersecurity?
Well, there's a few things in play. There's a few variables in play. So the first question sounds like you're looking towards a role in security. Is that the case? What is the end game for you? What are you trying to work towards?
I am actually trying to get into a cybersecurity field because that's what I want to do these days. So basically, I was trying to get started with the Security Plus, but unfortunately, this has been like 2 years, and I've never been able to, successfully pass it because through self-study or other stuff. But I also, this was the third attempt for the 501 exam. And the 501 exam has a lot of cryptologic questions and a lot of these questions. So I really need your advice that should I still stick to it, doing it, or should I try some other ones like CISSP or something else?
Yeah, the 501 exam is almost a brand new exam. More than half of that exam are new objectives over the 401. So you can't even really call it an update or upgrade to the 401. It's almost a brand new certification exam because the content is so different. I will say, though, and I know a lot of people like to start on the security side because it kind of makes sense. If you want to go into security, certainly you should have some certifications that deal with security. But I'm going to echo what someone in the chat room was saying, and something that I say in almost every single Security Plus study group is you usually don't start in the security roles. There usually are not entry-level positions in IT security. Usually you're moving into IT security from some other part in IT. And I will tell you that an enormous part of IT security is networking. There is probably more networking in IT security than there is security in IT security. And I'm speaking as someone who has been working with firewalls and intrusion prevention and SIMs, and prior to that worked for an antivirus company and implementing that in the enterprise. We also had PGP encryption and firewall technologies. We did so much on the networking side that was the core that I often see whenever I talk to people in a security role. I was working my last job as a systems engineer, so I got the advantage of going from company to company to company. I would probably visit 3 or 4 different companies in a single day. And almost without fail, the people I was talking with in the security role that were trying to get one of these next generation firewalls were all people I used to work with on the networking side when I worked as a representative for a protocol analyzer company and network management company. So it's interesting to see that we see this path that networking is such a huge part of security that it just makes sense they're pulling the networking people in to finally bring them up into security. And that's why I tell people, if you want an easy path into security, follow the networking path. That may be the better strategy for you, is get that foundation of networking in place so that you understand switching and routing protocols and IPsec and doing NATing and running into these weird one-off situations you run into, especially over wide area networks and internet connections. Once you have that foundation down of installing and implementing redundancy with routing, redundancy with switches, high-speed networking, aggregate link configurations, that's going to be an enormously valuable foundation to move into security from. So if you're having a problem or you're worrying that the jumping in on the security side isn't working as well as you would think, you may find an easier path by going on the networking side and work your way into security from there.
So are you recommending me that should I attempt the Network Plus before the Security Plus?
I think if anybody is interested in getting into security, Network Plus is probably the more logical path. It doesn't seem like it should be that way when you look at all the things that are written down and on the websites, but functionally out in the world, that's exactly the way it goes. Networking and getting as much networking knowledge as you can would be valuable. I would probably recommend that somebody go get Network Plus, go get their Cisco certifications, probably a Cisco CCNA routing and switching is a good example. And from there, you're now positioned well to maybe look into hopping into the security side from there. I think that's a much more straightforward and real world path to go.
Yes, because I heard like the CCNA is like more respectable certification in the networking side as compared to the Network Plus. Well,
you can't compare them. They are two completely different certifications that address two completely different requirements in IT. If you try to put those two things side by side, it doesn't make sense. Let's compare this car with a grocery store. Well, they're two different things that are used for two different purposes. The grocery store is so much bigger and has so many more products inside of it. Yeah, but the car is a foundational transportation tool. So you can't look at both of those and try to compare them. People often do, and it's a big mistake. Network Plus is a good entry level into networking. And the CCNA, even the CCENT, which is the first certification that Cisco expects you to get, that CCENT is an exceptionally difficult certification. It's not a cakewalk. It is very, very difficult. So you're right. People that do have the CCNA routing and switching, people do look at them and go, okay, you really understand command line setup, troubleshooting, recovery, routing protocols, redundancy. You're really into the meat of this. Absolutely. But there's a path to get to that point. I would never tell somebody, don't to go Network Plus, go CCNA. That may be the completely wrong path. You may want to start with Network Plus to give you a primer that will allow you to excel when you finally get into the CCNA technology. So it depends on how comfortable you are with networking and where your path happens to be. Maybe for you, it makes sense to skip the Network Plus. That's really going to be more of a personal decision you're going to need to make.
Okay, that's fine. I think this really clears up that what should I do next, because, I have to get somewhere started with the certification. So, and I would like to thank you for the amazing work you do again, and looking forward to more stuff from you, and keep doing the good work, sir.
Oh, it's coming. Thanks, Syed. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
That's always a challenge to get there. So let's go back in the queue. I probably was not potted up. I did not have this set correctly for the 240 area code, who was probably yelling at me on the line. There he is. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Now you're listening to the speaker, and you've got it on speakerphone. You're wondering, is he coming back? He has me on hold. I've been holding for 15 minutes. Is it ever going to happen? Are you there for 240 area code? You've walked away. You're tired of me. You're sick of it. You're not interested at all.
Yes, I am.
Oh, there he is. Hey, thanks for finally getting on there. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Raymond, and I'm calling from Colorado.
Hey, Raymond. What can we do for you?
Well, I have an electrical engineering background, and I've worked with microcontrollers. I've worked with SoC, Raspberry Pi, and I've kind of been doing my own homemade Internet of Things stuff.
Okay.
But I was looking into kind of step my foot into the Internet of Things as the industry is growing. And that was why I decided to go ahead and take Security Plus, because security is a very big concern when it comes to Internet of Things and devices.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been to me, I have kind of, even though I had nothing to do with IT, when I stepped my foot into it, I was able to understand everything, and I pretty much enjoy it so much. It's even, I kind of feel like I actually want to just move into IT, but I still want to retain that hardware and software programming skill.
Okay.
Yeah, so I want to know what advice would you give me if I'm trying to go fully into Internet of Things, because I was told you have to have a lot of skills. You have to know how to build the hardware. You have to know how to program the software. You have to know the security concerns. about all those devices, and that was why I decided to go into IA, take the security class. And after that, I will be taking Linux class to at least give me more in-depth into Linux architecture and being able to write programs for Linux microcontrollers and processors.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to know if this is actually a right path that I'm taking.
It is a path. The type of path you're talking about, though, is pretty well delineated in the world of information technology, or in technology in general. Where we generally see a line drawn is right down the middle, where on one side of the line is development work. This might be hardware development work. It might be ASICs. It might be someone designing appliances. It might be someone writing code to run on these appliances and embedded systems, or somebody writing code that's going to run in an operating system that's going to support those embedded systems. Very commonly, you see this, somebody's going to build the firewall. They're going to build the switch. They're going to build the router, which is effectively a piece of hardware with, of course, the software layered right on top of it to make everything work. And, of course, there's software out in the world that has a SSL VPN client that allows you to connect to that firewall for encrypted communication. That whole side is effectively computer science. That's a very broad brush that I'm painting, but that is one side of things. The other side is the information technology side. It's the people that are implementing the firewalls. They're managing the firewall. They're installing the switches and routers. They're building out the router configurations. They're setting the NAT configurations. They're connecting to the wide area networks. They're providing redundancy across all of these. They're monitoring and making sure they stay up and running, and they're fixing them if they break. They're not people doing programming. Probably, and I would not consider the scripting done by someone in that role to be programming. That's scripting. So there's a pretty big divide. There's a pretty big separation, and you don't generally see people doing computer science as also having a role on the information technology side, or vice versa. It is one of those where there's not a lot of overlap between those two. The only place I really do kind of see some overlap is if you have your own company. You're writing your own software, you're building out your own systems, and you're deploying them, or you're putting them into a location by yourself. That obviously is a very niche type of configuration. If you're trying to get into a role in a large organization, you're usually going to have to pick between one or the other.
Okay.
Not necessarily the best of both worlds, but at least you've got a decision. Sounds like you're interested on both sides of this. So this is a good kind of problem to have, which is, what side of this do I go on? And generally speaking, I wish there were more developers who had more of an understanding of IT security. I wish there were more developers who understood what an IP packet looked like. That would have been very helpful at times, running across certain problems that I ran into. And an understanding of those things helps you now move up into a role where you're now more of a product manager. You understand what the requirements are for this piece of hardware. You understand the big picture across all of that, and you may not be the one creating the development of the hardware or building the applications that layer on top of it, but you're the one designing and telling the developers, here's what we want this thing to do. So there's absolutely a role in both IT and in computer science for somebody with that knowledge. It's just one of those that you may have to work into once you pick a side.
All right. That absolutely helps, and thank you very much for your contribution. Your videos have helped me so much, and I have your study guide and I use it. The funny thing is, I was on 401 and they switched after I think last month.
Right.
And I was kind of caught in between, so I had to buy the other study guide and start studying for that one. But I'm really doing very well after now.
Well, if somebody is in the situation you are, where you've been studying for the 401 and it was retired, it's now no longer there. If you've already bought the 401 course notes and you log into your member login, there's a 50% discount for upgrading to the 501, so you don't have to pay full price again.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's at least
right, because I think I already did, but I think that shouldn't be a problem. That's fine.
Well, if you didn't, send me a note, send me a email with what you are, and I can easily refund that out so that you get the upgrade price, because you should have a benefit for that. I like that people are are making that investment in themselves. I like to support that.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Raymond. Best of luck.
Same to you.
That's fantastic. That's plenty of things to consider. Yeah, if somebody has already purchased the 401 course notes and you want the 501, I do this with all the upgrades. So if you've been working on one and then all of a sudden they change the exam on you, you can get the newest version of them available for a 50% discount. You just log into your member login on the Professor Messer website. There's a member link right at the top of the screen, and you can get that upgrade for a half price. That's kind of gets you in there reasonably rather than having to pay full price again. So don't want you to have to be stuck with that when it's coming through. Some folks in the chat room talking about those Cisco certifications. You're absolutely right. You need a lot of tools for the Cisco certifications. Some people get hands-on hardware. Some people use packet tracers. Some people use GNS3. A lot of advantages and disadvantages with all of those, by the way. And some people use all three of them, like me, because one is just not good enough. I have to use everything. Let's go back to the phones. The 760 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Oh, I have to push the on button, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? See, it's not me that time. Are you there, caller? I don't hear a thing. No background noise, no white noise. There might not be a microphone plugged in. I might be on mute. It's hard to tell. We'll stick you back in the queue, though. Maybe you can figure that piece out. Figure out why. Why did that happen? What happened there? In fact, I can't even stick you back in the queue. Problem might be on my side. And it was terminated anyway. So that happened. You can always try it back in. If you're calling in on Skype, by the way, there's that Skype call testing service. You can run through that, see if Skype can hear you properly. That might help you. And people in the chat room are even saying what I said. Those Cisco exams, those are some tough exams. Those are some hard exams. It's not one you could just walk into and you're doing well. In the CCNA routing and switching exams, you can take the first exam, the ICND1, and then take the ICND2. So it's two exams you would take. There is a combined exam. And I can't imagine, you would really have to be someone very, very familiar with Cisco technologies to even consider taking that exam, because you'd have to know a lot of content really cold when you walk in for that one. I would probably recommend most people don't even think about doing that. It's more of a case where I need to, especially if this is your first, if you are one of those people that skipped Network Plus thinking you were going to jump right into the Cisco, you're going to be on that ICND1 for a long time, because you have to start with, how does a switch work? How does a router work? What is an IP address? You're starting back there. And then on top of that, you got to configure a switch and configure a router and set up all of these configurations, set up redundant routing connections, set up NTP on a switch and a router. That's remarkable amount of content. I can't imagine jumping into that with no networking knowledge and having something like that happen. You really have to work at it. And it does take a little long. You can do it. It's going to take you a little longer because you're now beginning at the bottom, and you're not just stopping after you get the fundamentals. You're going way beyond. It's not twice as much content as the Network Plus. It's 4 times as much, if that, probably more, 5 times as much. It's just a ton of things you have to remember. And the Cisco exams are all about a scenario. They put you in a network. You have to go to console settings on switches and routers and figure out where the problems are. It's not a simple A, B, C, D, or E scenario when you get into those. But fortunately, there's a pretty large group of people on the internet who are working towards this. So there's a good number of resources available. I, of course, have a set of course notes for the ICND1. There's plenty of places on the website to go to gather labs for packet tracer, labs for GNS3, labs if you have physical equipment. People sell physical equipment packages on eBay. There's lots of ways to get some very economical entry level. I think packet tracer is great for the ICND1 There's only a few scenarios with the ICND1 where packet tracer is any good. I like packet tracer because it's so fast to set up and run, and it doesn't require any special licensing or software on my side. GNS3 is very flexible, a little more difficult to get up and running, and it requires that you already have licenses for the router and switch code if you are doing this in a proper licensed way, which you should be. So that's one of the scenarios you will run into to have that there. So question in the chat room concerning protocols. I'm assuming this is Security Plus we're talking about, but you could tell me if it's different. Should we mainly focus on studying the protocols mentioned in the exam objectives? Are there more we should be aware of? From my perspective, for the purposes of your certification exam, stick to the exam objectives. If it's not on the exam objectives, don't spend any time trying to learn it. So this particular question specific to Security Plus, there's a section on Security Plus that deals with secure protocols. We had the question earlier about secure protocols. It's that section. So make sure that you know everything listed in the exam objectives, but I've seen people hand out sheets of paper that are just a page of protocols. You don't need to know that. I mean, you do. Well, ultimately, you need to know that. If you get a job in security, you will need to know the protocols on that page. For the purposes of your certification, you don't need to know that. You should stick to exactly what's on the exam objectives page. And you will go to websites like the CompTIA subreddit on reddit.com, and you will read that people on my exam, they asked me this. And they may have asked them something that was not in the exam objectives. And people on that subreddit, I think, overreact at times and think, okay, everybody, we all have to know this information as well. I don't think you should do that. You could spend the rest of your life studying things that aren't on the exam objectives. My CompTIA stays extremely close to the exam objectives for the exam. I mean, they are spot on with these exam objectives. Very rarely do they go outside the scope of the exam objectives. It is so rare that I don't find it's worth any of your time to study outside those exam objectives. I think that time should be better spent sticking to the exact list of objectives, because it's going to be a much more possible case that you will be asked something from those exam objectives. That's really where the focus will be. And if you know every single one of the exam objectives, you can explain it to someone else. You know how to implement it. You know how it works in an enterprise. You know what that technology does. You have a good understanding of that scope of technology, and you understand everything that's in the exam objectives, you're going to do fine. So stick to the exam objectives. Don't go outside the scope. And that's just the thing that I think throws a lot of people off, is they get a big list of port numbers and protocols, and they think, I've got to memorize this 100 protocols. And in fact, after they take the exam and they post their experiences, they say, I spent all my time studying these 100 protocols. They might have asked me about 6 of them. Those are the 6 that are on the exam objectives. What'd you do that for? Why did you? They're very angry. Why did I study those 100? Well, of course you are. You should not have studied those 100 protocols. That's not where you should have gone with that. So that's a real challenge. From the chat room, what is the benefit of having the Cisco certifications in addition to the CompTIA certifications? I'm assuming Network Plus specifically. The A Plus exam, the Network Plus, and to some degree the Security Plus exam are entry-level exams into those fields of study. So A Plus generally is your entry level into operating systems and computer hardware. Network Plus is generally an entry level into switching and routing and networking technologies. Security Plus is your entry level into the world of security. It gives you an understanding of the nomenclature, the technologies that are used, and how they're being implemented out in the enterprise. But none of those prepare you for any true hands-on of using these technologies. Network Plus isn't going to teach you how to configure a switch, how to configure a router, how to set up link aggregation on a switch, how to set up VLANs on a switch. Network Plus tells you what VLANs are. The Cisco certifications show you how to configure them. That's probably the best example I can give you of the differences. So when somebody is maybe looking at a future in networking, a very common path is to start with the Network Plus and then move into the Cisco certifications. If somebody's looking into security, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's probably the same path. I think it's starting with Network Plus and then getting into the Cisco certifications. The real question people have is, do I skip Network Plus? And a lot of that depends on how much time are you ready to start with your ICND1 and work from the very bottom up. I think getting that foundation on Network Plus is going to jumpstart you when you're ready to start your ICND1 studies. So it's really up to you. It's going to take you longer to do the ICND1 if you hit it fresh, if you've not got that Network Plus beforehand. But also, if you're just looking for that first entry-level role into an organization, you want to be part of a help desk. You want to be part of the first-level NOC help desk, Network Operations Center. The Network Plus is a perfect certification for that. You don't need to know how to configure a switch. You're not going to be doing that. You don't need to know how to configure a router. They're not going to let you touch the router. You just got there. You just touched the computer at that company for the first time. You're not going to be configuring any switches yet. You're not going to be configuring any VLANs. You will eventually. But first you need that initial role. And from there, you move into those pieces. Let's quickly go back to the calls, and then I have a question in the chat room about log files, and I have an answer for you about log files that might help you. Don't take that link of reading logs. That's not a good link. That's an awful link, actually. And I'll explain why in a moment. Let's go to the phone line, 760 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there, caller? I've got you potted up. We should be able to hear you, but I don't hear you. Are you there, caller? We'll give you a second. Maybe check the mute. Maybe check other things that are there. Actually, that link in the chat room is actually a good one. What was I talking about? I was thinking of a different link. It's a very good link. Whoever has that. Guest 007. I was completely wrong, sir. You have proven me incorrect. Do not hear you, caller. We'll stick you back in the queue. Maybe you're able to call back. Check your mic, caller. You're not there. So in the chat room was a link of a bunch of logs, which is a really good one. Log samples from the OSSEC 2.8.1 documentation, which is this big link. Can we just go to the root of that link and really find it easily so I don't have to name what it is? We can, I think. I think we can do that. It's probably under log monitoring, log analysis. For the, you really can't. But it's under ossec-docs.readthedocs.io. And I'll have, we'll put it into the notes in the YouTube to have that there. But it's just a big list of different log files that you can pull from. Want to know what an Apache log looks like? Click, got an Apache log. You want to know what an IPS log looks like? They've got a couple of options there you can pull from. So go into those and see if you can find them. A bunch of log samples. We've got some for Radius, Windows routing, messages from operating systems like OS X, FTP logs, Cisco logs, name resolution logs, checkpoint firewall logs, IP tables logs. Good stuff there. So you can at least get a feel for what those are. Now, it doesn't have vulnerabilities in there. You're not finding things that are going wrong. So one of the things I was going to mention that I would recommend, go to the Google machine and type in, pick your favorite firewall. Pick a firewall live demo. And what you'll find is a number of firewall companies have live demonstration firewalls that have like a demo username with a demo password that they give you on the screen. You don't have to register. You don't have to talk to anybody. And you can log into the firewall, and now you're running this firewall that has sample traffic going through it. That includes vulnerabilities, people attacking. It's got all kinds of good stuff in there because it's a demo. And you can go through the log files, and you can see what the logs look like when the IPS function of a firewall has identified a SQL injection. So that's one thing you can do. A lot of the logs I used in my log video come from places like that because they're just out there. They're available. So why not use a live firewall demo and hunt for some of those? There's 3 or 4 or 5 different really good options out there, at least. You should easily be able to find those. It's a great way to not only become familiar with what you can expect to see when you look at a next generation firewall or even a last generation firewall, but you can see what the logs are as you're drilling down on these particular errors. It's a great way to do it. I wasn't able to find Palo Alto Networks, but I was able to find almost everything else. I think at one point I found a checkpoint. There were certainly some others in there. Most of the time it's sort of the small, medium business firewalls that you'll find, but there's just as valid content. The logs between firewalls they're sort of the similar information. There's a source. There's a source IP, a source port number, a destination IP address, a destination port number, a IPS code, an error message, a number associated with the error message, there's a bunch of links. There's all kinds of information in the timestamps, destination interface, source interface. That's all in there. So you can become a little more familiar with these things. A lot of people on the exam I've seen lately, I haven't seen many of these lately, actually. They might have pulled it from the exam. But on Reddit, a lot of people were wanting to know what programming languages they should learn in order to interpret the questions they were getting on the exam. Don't do that. No. You don't need to know anything about programming languages for your Security Plus exam. Not where you should be going. Not an issue. It's not in the exam objectives anywhere. And if they are asking you those questions, it's probably one of those that is not graded, but they have in the exam anyway, which I think they shouldn't do personally, but they do it. There will be questions on your exam that will not have a grade associated with them. You can't get it right and you can't get it wrong. They just put it on the exam to see how you do. Whether that's good or bad is up to you, but I think that may have been one of those that's good or bad. But that's one that you'll have to look for. That's one. Do not worry. Don't learn a programming language and try to figure out what certain attacks look like through the programming. That's well out of scope for the Security Plus exam. You're much better off spending your time learning what's in the exam objectives. That's your focus. Jacob in the chat room is absolutely correct. Guest 38 asks, SDN, software-based networking, software as the core of what we're doing on networks is pretty important. It is really the latest generation of what we're doing with networks today. The concept of automation, the concept of building out networks out of a virtual world along with these virtual servers is just normal now. It's just the way we do things. Our firewalls are virtual. Our switches are virtual. Our routers are virtual. We are now putting physical products on the outside of our virtual worlds because there's so much bandwidth and they need a piece of hardware just to keep up with it. But the inside of the networks, the inside of these virtual worlds is where a lot of the software-defined networking and other technologies are really happening. So the concept's a really good one, by the way. The SDNs are, imagine you've got a blank slate and there's a big project going on. It's the accounting department again. It's the end of the year. They have a brand new piece of software that third parties are coming in. They are putting their tax forms on your site, and they're then processing the tax forms. How do you handle this influx of people before April the 15th here in the United States, which is tax day? So from the very beginning of the year, for months, there's an enormous amount of resources needed, tons of drive space, web servers, you've got database servers, there's security firewall technologies, you've got intrusion prevention that you're doing. There's redundancy in those links. And then all of a sudden, April the 1st hits and you need twice as much capacity. That's the beauty of SDN, because This is all predefined. Someone hits a button and suddenly a new instance of that application is created. Sorry. And if you have more people that need access to that application, you just keep hitting the button. And if you have the resources, you keep building out more web servers and more database servers and more security appliances and more switches and more routers and the VLANs that separate them. The security is built into that. You know it works because you've already deployed it once. Let's deploy it 100 times. SDN has incredible flexibility. And then when April the 15th hits, you can start removing some of those. And they go away and it frees up resources for other things. The idea behind the networking piece of this is that just as we're building out these virtual servers, we're building the entire virtual network that connects all of it together. The VLANs, the switching, the routing between all of these, it's high speed, it's virtual, it's all internal to these devices, but has the same function and the same control as anything else. It's about separating out the control of the device versus what the device is doing. You'll see this in a lot of modern technologies that are actually pieces of hardware, is they have a management plane where you can go in and configure the device, but the actual data plane, the processing plane of the device is completely separate inside of the device, not only logically, but physically separate inside of these devices. So a lot of modern firewalls, you'll be configuring the firewall and looking at logs and running reports, and that's all in a separate piece of hardware inside of that box than the actual firewalling that is taking place in a completely separate piece of hardware. So there's the same idea applies to SDN, is that I can do my configurations, push a button, and suddenly I'm building out the engine that's doing everything on the software side. It's a remarkable technology. I don't think a lot of companies are truly taking advantage of it the way we designed it in our head to be, that automation of being able to push that button and automatically build things out. I think we're still learning how to do that well. But the companies that are able to make that happen, and that's where the scripting comes in. That's where a lot of the Python comes in, where you're learning how to script all of these things out. That's where that value is. And that's where we get into this conversation about, do you need to know programming? No, but you do need to know scripting. Python is not programming. People say that Python is programming. It's not. It's scripting. I mean, it's a programming language, but it's an interpreted language. It's not programming. Programming is more in the object-oriented. It's a completely different world of thought and process and structure than Python, quite honestly. But Python is the thing that allows us the automation. It's really more building a framework and putting these things together. It's more of telling the turtle how many steps to take. It's a very simplified form of programming, if you really want to use that term. That's really what it is. So yes, and everybody talks about the automation because that's where the value is. Imagine that you were asleep and suddenly your network needs twice as much capacity. The network already realized it. It recognized it needed capacity. It automatically deployed the new accounting instance. It deployed 5 new ones. By the time you came into the office in the morning, it had already deployed 5 new instances, found that the amount of traffic had decreased a bit, took out a couple of them, and when you come in, there's 3 more instances running that you never touched. You never pushed a button to deploy. You never yourself made that happen. It was all magical behind the scenes. It was seamless to the end user. That's the value. There's so much value there. That from a business perspective, that's beautiful, because some of the biggest costs you have in a business is the people. So if you can take the people out of it and completely automate it, that's the way you should do it. Yes, as I say, Python is a programming language like a bicycle is a high-speed transportation device. That's the difference. It's not really programming. There's a programming component to it. It's sort of like the basics of programming is what Python is. It is not programming. It is a structured language that allows you to automate things. That's what Python is. Not that it's not a valuable skill. It's absolutely a valuable skill. If you're doing this in networking, you should learn Python. It's absolutely something you should know. But it's not programming. There is programming, That's what that's what the software developers do on the computer science side. The computer science side, those programmers, they're not using Python. But wait, if Python was a programming language, why aren't programmers using it? Because it's not. It's a way to automate. It's a scripting language. It's more than a scripting language, but it's not pure programming. So it's one of those things where it requires you to have some additional skills in how to use these technologies and how to write code, a little bit of code, but it's not programming. Don't fall into that trap anyway. Don't fall into that trap of what other people think technology is. If you know how to code, then you know technology. No, don't do that. That's not true. Stop it. But it is a nice skill to have, a great skill to have. Whenever I was been doing things with technology, being able to write to an API of a firewall and have that firewall do things. Prior to Python, we used Perl a lot and Perl libraries. It would be great. You could write a little script that would go to the firewall, run a query, look at traffic over a certain amount of time, pull it back, and put that into a web page that I could look at. That was just an automated report building process. Being able to make Perl do that, being able to make Python do these things, that's a valuable skill. And the more your understanding of that, the more you'll be able to do things within networking, security, SDN, and even more. There's some nice things you can do there. Almost everybody now has a Python library you can write to. It's almost not even fair anymore. The people that wrote the library did the hard part. You just tell the library, hey, go get something for me. And then magically it appears. Wow, that was easy. That's what you need to learn how to do, because you could be a magician with very, very little effort and be able to really manage all these very diverse components and be able to automate exactly what they're doing. So that's your value of Python and how that should work for you. Quickly back to the phones before my voice goes out. 760 area code. Are you there, caller? Which name are you calling from? I think we're doing it again. Poor 760. I am potted up here. You're live. I've got you online. It all looks so good, and yet I don't hear a thing. It could very well be a problem on my side, but I don't think that's the case. I got everything where it should be. I am so sorry, caller, that did not work out. We'll return it to the queue. Have those there. I don't think it's my side. I just did troubleshooting. I just looked at where my pot was. I looked at, am I potted up? Is on the right. Yep, it's all there. Everything here is fine. I don't know. One way to tell is now I'm not going to play anything from that machine. Now I'm going to break things. Let's try troubleshooting. And then springs start popping out and bouncing around. And then nothing works again, which is probably okay because we've really come to the end of another hour, which means it's the end of my voice there. That's your real challenge, to have all this thing. One last question, though. I will answer one last question from the chat room, and then we'll finish these things up here, which was asking, would it be best to learn on a PC or a Mac? And the answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. If you're getting into IT security, you should have a very familiar perspective of Mac OS. Mac OS is used by so many security professionals because it's an easy platform to use. It's well supported. Wireless works on Mac OS. You can plug in almost any hardware and it works because of the support they put into that platform. Linux, probably just as powerful if you could do the same thing. Try to get wireless working 100% of the time on Linux. It's not always is the way you certainly can't plug in anything and have it work on Linux. It's not always available. A driver may not even be available on the Linux side for what you want. It's always been the problem with Linux is hardware support. We have come very far with Linux since then. But to be a desktop operating system, maybe we haven't come that far. Mac OS is, from a security perspective, that's the primary platform people will use. Not that more people aren't, just as many people are using Windows 10, because they are. A lot of people use Windows 10 as their desktop or laptop computer, and that's a completely viable platform too. But when you get into security, there's a lot of things you can do on Mac OS that you can't do easily on Windows. Linux would be a good alternative if only it had the hardware support. And that's going to be your biggest challenge with Linux, is the hardware support. And there's just things in Mac OS that are much more elegant and work so much better. When Microsoft did not coerce you into Windows 10, they forced you into Windows 10 at the point of a gun. So maybe that's a good choice. Everybody's going to Windows 10. Whether you want to go to Windows 10 or not, you're going to Windows 10. But I don't want to go to Windows 10. Yes, you do. And you're going, because Microsoft said you are. And quite honestly, Windows 10, thankfully, completely viable, and they understand it. Yeah, you're using Windows 7 today, but you're going to be using Windows 10 tomorrow. It's going. It's just one of those things to have that thing there. And I think that's where pretty much everybody's going to be on 10 for what they're doing going forward. So yeah, maybe by tonight you'll be on Windows 10. You'll wake up in the morning and you'll be on Windows 10. Sometimes that happens. It happened to a lot of people. But don't worry, Microsoft apologized for that. So there you go. See how simple that was? Windows 10 is pretty nice. You may not want to wait so long. There's some good things there. That may be the way to do it. So I think the more operating systems you know, both Linux is from a security perspective, all your servers are going to be running Linux. Your SIM is probably going to be on Linux. There's tons of things you're doing on the Linux side. There's going to be, of course, all your users are going to be on Windows. People running your SSL VPN and connecting from the outside and using your multiple forms of authentication, those factors that they're using, are going to be doing it from a Windows workstation. And of course, you are going to be using Mac OS because you need something that nobody's going to be able to hack into while you're trying to do your job, and something that's going to be able to support all the hardware that you need to plug into this machine. So you've got this combination of operating systems, and those are the three you need to know. You don't need to know everything there is to know about everything with those. But the more you do, the better. In my world, I run Mac OS as my desktop. If you're on my website right now, Professor Messer, you're on one of a few Linux machines. That's almost exclusively my back end. And I've got Windows machines that I use for streaming and for capturing data inside my studio that are in my big data center. That's really a 19-inch rack that's in the other room. That I've got Windows devices in there that are doing things, and I'm probably doing more with Windows because there's so much software support for them. So having a knowledge of all of those can only help you. You won't get a fight out of me. A lot of people like to pick one or the other, and we get to complain about it the whole time. There's no complaining here. I use all of them. I like all of them. And there's a use for every single one of those. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. And speaking of advantages and disadvantages, there goes my throat. That's enough for this today. No 10 gig on my network yet. Although my system in front of me supports 10 gig, you're just encouraging me, to upgrade my network. That will be the next step. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thanks for just hanging out with me and talking about technology. Thanks for being here in the first hour with the Q&A. Thanks for being here in the second hour with the questions that who knows what it might be. I'm here all the time. You're always welcome to hit the Contact Us link at the top of the bottom of the website. Sometimes I'm able to communicate and get things back to you. I try to answer all of the emails. I'm not always successful, but I really do try. Thanks for sending those. And of course, I'll be sending all of you those CEUs that you sent in from the first hour. Thanks for joining us. Check back in next month for the next Security Plus Study Group, and check the calendar. You may want to join us for the A Plus or the Network Plus Study Group. But until then, we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everyone.